what are you eating in Gainesville? Where are you going in Gainesville? And what brands do you use like that are national brands? And let's start with those 5 or 6 companies and say, hey, like, let's try to get something there. But when athletes come to Florida, they have 3 turnkey NIL deals in town they can take advantage of day one.
Be the story. Ever wonder how athletes make millions and thousands off the field? I'm Jay Hicks, where we empower aspiring athletes and sports enthusiasts to navigate the NIL landscape. I'm joined today by my co-host, Keith Miller.
There we go. Let's go. Let's go, Jay. I'm excited about today.
Yeah, today we're going to be diving in really, really deeply. We have a very special guest. He's at the forefront of turning athletic talent into earnings. Ben Chase, Director of NIL Strategy for the University of Florida Gators. Ben, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. I can't wait to chop it up with J and K. I'm just going to call you J and K.
I love it.
Ooh,
love it. That's the new nickname.
I like that.
There you go.
Show,
branding 101 right there.
I love it. I love it. All right. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter for real-time updates and exclusive behind-the-scenes content. And you know what, Keith? You know what, Ben? We're just going to jump right into it. Are you guys ready?
Let's go.
All right. So got to talk to you about this. For you, you know, you're at the University of Florida Gators, a top tier professional. I call it professional sports because you guys are so good. The Gators, right? You and I were talking about this the other day, top 5, top 10 in so many sports. But one of the things we know that's so clear is that there's a war chest, right? And it's not just buzzwords. And giving, you know, my experience and Keith's experience working with strategic funds for student athletes and outcomes, could you share Florida's approach from a strategic standpoint, and what innovative strategies are you guys implementing to help the Gators stay on top?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. Going back to what you said about being, you know, top at everything. I mean, we closed the last half of the year. You know, we were, you know, in the Final Four for Women's College World Series, Final Four for the Men's College World Series, Final Four for lacrosse. Like, we had an incredible year. I mean, Final Four for gymnastics, and we're hoping to start this year off in volleyball and football and men's and women's basketball. I mean, we won national championships in track. So we like to consider ourselves an everything school. I don't know how many of your listeners or followers know what the Learfield Cup is, but we're always a top 10 team in that, which is, you know, across the board, all of our sports. Yeah. And I would say when it comes to, you know, strategy, it's case by case, sport by sport, right? Every coach is, you know, the leader and GM and, you know, signal caller for how they want to build it. And, you know, some coaches, they care about the interpersonal, you know, one-on-one, and it also by the athlete too. You know, not every athlete cares about, you know, having a brand or, you know, and all that stuff. We have an athlete on campus. I just spoke with his dad yesterday, and he wants to do NIL stuff. And I'm like, well, he wants on Instagram. So like you got to start doing a little bit of that. But let's say we sit down with each coach and we say, hey, like, how do you want to do it? You know, on the war chest side, that's a lot. I mean, fundraising is a huge part of it right now.
Right.
When everything goes in house in the future, that could be a change. You know, just 2 hours ago or so, Alabama's nonprofit collective said they're going to, you know, fold. So we'll see how many of those nonprofit side folds. But I'd say, you know, the things that we do here is, you know, our coaches are going to do it the right way with integrity.
Right.
And, you know, there's coaches out there recruiting 2026, 2027 and giving these kids numbers, and we don't even know what it's going to look like. Is that even legal? So there's a lot of that's going on, and our coaches know that they're not going to put anything out there that is going to expose them in the long run, when at the end of the day, it's about the kids and these athletes and caring about them for sure.
Yeah, talk to me real quickly, because you guys are obviously in the SEC. So much pressure because there's so many good programs. You guys, obviously, we know on the collective side, really have strong efforts. Talk to me from a strategic standpoint, because we know like where we are today versus the day that it started are completely different. And it's like, you know, when I said war chest, the other thing too, the buzzword we both know, Keith and Ben, is an arms race.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things, and Keith can jump in whenever. You know, the first collective was the Gator Collective. So You're welcome, nation. So like, but with that, it's like, you know, when you're the first one to run through that door, you're going to get scars, right? You're going to get bruises. I would say, you know, we we've learned a lot in this space, and we've learned what the limits are, right? And our collective Florida Victorious has done a great job of reeling it back in and getting alignment with the university, getting alignment with our boosters foundation. At Florida, the Gators are a separate entity than the school, right? So like at some schools, that's different. They're aligned. One of my friends, she teaches out of school, and when she was hired by athletics, they didn't tell her she was also going to be teaching a class, right? So like I would not expect to teach a class here at Florida unless the university reached out to me specifically. So I would say that on the war chest and the fundraising, it's one of those things where, I mean, just yesterday Ohio State said they spent $20 million on their football team, and you can see they got a quarterback in the portal. They got a lot of talent through the portal, and maybe that's what that is. And in 2025, when this is all coming in house, there's a question of, are those kids going to get a pay cut because there's the cap, and $20 million of external money is different than $20 million internally when there could be rev share and Title IX and all across all sports.
Yeah. So Ben, you're touching on some really cool stuff, because for me, like spending 25 years on campus doing compliance, I always thought, all right, it's not about what I know rules wise. I mean, certainly that plays a factor, but the key to being successful was managing the personality. So you've got the war chest that Jay's mentioning, and you got all this other information, but on the other hand, in the role you're in, you're managing the personalities, and talk about that. Yeah. As best you can. I mean,
it's hard. I would say this, like I get calls from our coaches, and it's like, hey, like so-and-so just offered the recruit a car. And like, okay, like what do you want me to do in this moment? But it's really just I'm calling to vent, right? Like, because it's one of those things where there's a lot of undermining and backstage deals. At least now it's NIL, now it's legal, kind of, right? But it's managing expectations, and I have touch points with coaches, athletes, donors, local businesses, compliance. I'm an attorney myself, so my office is actually right down like my hallway is compliant. So, and that's, you wear a lot of hats in this thing. I was just literally before this call, I was in our football facility getting football and volleyball players signing their trading cards for this season that I'm shipping back to Boise for them to be packed up and sold to our fans. So there's a lot of different touch points and a lot of managing of egos and a lot of, I'm grateful because I am a Gator too. I didn't really talk about my background at all, but it is my university, so I have a little bit extra love there. It's a labor of love, and I'm grateful to be here.
Ben, got to ask you this. You just mentioned some of the news and some of the schools like Ohio State that are mentioning some of these moves that they're making. How do you guys respond internally? I mean, is there a lot of tweets and emails going around? Are you guys going back to the drawing board? Like, how do you guys react? Because it's so quickly changing and moving.
Well, there's a lot of puffery out there, a lot of peacocking, if you will. And for me, when I wouldn't want to have like our budget out there, right? And the why is because, all right, well, that means either you're broke or you're overspending, right? Like that's kind of where, like, there's a lot of schools and a lot of collectives that are run by like national companies that'll do press releases for the sake of a press release because they're doing sales, right? So like there's a lot of companies out there that are managing, multiple collectives, or they're a lot of agents or even street agents that, they'll message a beat writer and say, hey, like, can you let the people know that we brokered, so-and-so deals? And you'll see it in the NBA now too. Like, so-and-so signs a $20 million deal. This deal was by whoever the agent was. And that's trickling down to the NIL space too. So I don't even know what the question was, but I just started rambling.
No, I love it. We were just talking about how you guys are reacting, and I love it. I mean,
so how we're reacting. I mean, so it's one of those things where, we can't get too high, can't get too low.
Yeah.
When a press release comes out, or we see numbers, or we hear stuff, like when I first got here, I've only been here since January of last year. If a coach calls me and says, hey, like, they got offered a car, I would like not sleep for. I had really bad anxiety when I first got here. Like I'd wake up at 3 a.m. and not sleep till 5, and that was because like I care about winning, I care about impact and winning, but like there's so many rules and regulations that we have to follow, and not everyone is following those. But that's just part of the game, right? And today, I just bought this a book today about how to win in the new era of college football. So I mean, there's a lot out there, a lot of creators that are have their foot on the scale, if you will, of what this is going to look like. There's a lot of NIL influencers that are attorneys and writers and bankers and investors in NIL companies, unions, and they kind of have their foot on the scale too, because they want to see something happen that benefits them. That's so there's a lot of different things there. We're going back to how do we react? Don't get too high, don't get too low. Yeah. See if there's something we can do there. For example,
and let me ask you, is that because you guys feel comfortable with your strategy, right? And knowing that you can't jump all the time with all the movements? Or is that where that?
I think it's one of those things where it's like, all right, well, if we do that tomorrow, when does the impact happen, right? So like we can take a step back and say, all right, like so-and-so announces this. When does that really impact their season? Does it impact it immediately? Is it something that we need to do immediately? I think one of the perfect examples at Florida is, this season, our 50-50 raffle at football games, half of it goes towards a bank for our athletes. And like last year, I tried to get that done with compliance, and I got, and with the NCAA regulations, our team didn't feel it was comfortable. Mind you, there were other schools out there, big schools, that were able to do it last season. So even though we were a year late, we want to do it the right way. We didn't want to put any exposure. So like, there's things like that where we're like, oh, like I wish we could do that, but we have to trust that, our compliance team is aligned on that and also understands there is an impact to winning there.
Yeah. And I'm going to feel like a coach here, because I feel like I've heard coaches say this a lot, but when I'm hearing Ben talk about all this, control what you can control is what I'm hearing Ben say, and I feel like I've heard coaches say that down through time. And I think that's a great piece of wisdom, as we enter this NIL space right now, is control what you can control. And you're right. There's a lot of noise out there, but you focus on what's ahead of you. Yeah.
And like, we, in the new era, that's, we're in a new era, but the era is, we're on page 3 right now. Right. So like, I always say each year is, so NIL became a thing in 2021. That was freshman year. 2022, sophomore. 23, junior. Now we're in senior year, right? We're about to graduate to rev share, right? So like, if you think about it that way, it took us 4 cycles to, go through this college thing together, and COVID and that extra COVID years and all that stuff. So like, there's a lot of things that happened at the same time here, right? So, I'm excited to graduate into the rev share era. It just took a little bit. But like you said, control what you can control. And right now, Coach Gundy at Oklahoma State, he got a little pushback for what he said, but he said, hey, like, this is not the time for your agent to be asking me for a raise, right? Like, it's time to play football. And
what's your reaction? You saw that just like the rest of us. What were your immediate thoughts?
So like last year, I had an agent from one of our athletes say, hey, like, my so-and-so is getting this much and he's starting and the backup is getting this much. And I'm like, okay, but like, it's week 3 or whatever, and like you're not going to get a raise in the middle of the season. Like that's just not how it works. You signed a contract. Like an NFL player is not getting a raise in the middle of the season, much less in.
Do you think that makes it tough, right? Because we know the NFL isn't dealing, to your point, with contract negotiations or talking.
Yeah, and also like that's a whole conversation with the collective. That's not with me. I'm a university person, right? So like the next year when it's rev share, you're probably going to sign a 2-year contract. Right. And be here for 2 years. And maybe there's some deliverables on that side. But, it's one of those things where I understood what he was saying. Like, you guys, normally those football contracts are signed in June or May, right? Or right after the spring game for the next year. And he said that, August 20th, maybe like last week. It's crazy how the news cycle, it literally was probably last week, but I don't even know. But like, it's 2 weeks before kickoff. They're not like, the contract is probably through December, like you said. So like, it's like, were you going to hold out for, and miss getting on your tape that you need to make the NFL? Like, I don't know. It's just a tough situation. I mean, and maybe there have been holdouts at different schools, but like, what's that look like?
Yeah. Do you think we're going to see more holdouts? Yeah. Do you think we're going to see more holdouts in the future?
I mean, I think we're getting to the point where, like, in the rev share model, you'll probably sign a contract that includes playing, in the games that you're healthy and playing in the bowl game, because that's like you're getting paid, and like the schools are getting paid to go to that bowl game. However, I didn't know this until I got here. Like, if you're a part of the football coaching staff or any sport and you make the postseason, the coaches all get bonuses, right? So like, and maybe that's something that is baked into the rev share model, even though like that would be a performance bonus. So it's just or maybe it's a continuation of the season technically, because you're going to be playing for another 3 weeks or so. So that's something that needs to be worked out. I don't expect to see any kind of finalization until March or April, which is crazy because we were recruiting for 2026 and 2027, right? Like, and we have to only recruit by what the guidelines are right now, when they're going to change, and
right,
like by next year. Some of our coaches, like I said earlier, like there's coaches out there promising stuff and for class of 2026, and we don't even know what class of 2025 is going to look like.
Yeah, and that's a good segue. I have a question here for you, Ben. Talking about, you mentioned some of the things about the agents. You're talking about, Coach Gundy up at Oklahoma State, and we know you guys were dealing with the Jaden Richard case. People can Google on their own about that. We're not going to get into that, but it brings up a good point about lessons and things that parents and high school coaches can learn. Like, what is, because what you're describing, and I'm just putting myself in the place of a parent or a high school coach who are dealing with these things. There's a lot of these moving parts, and you're at the forefront. What are some of the things that parents can learn coming straight out of that case, and also overall kind of in that same conversation?
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned high school. I spoke with one of the coaches for Montverde, which is a really big basketball program in Central Florida here.
Yep.
They're going to invite me to speak to their whole coaches and staff on campus probably in a few weeks. But it's one of those things where, like, the awareness of, I kind of relate it to, when this is all happening, and like you are so piped in. So like, say you're a Gator fan, right? Mm-hmm. And you're a casual fan, you just watch the Gators and you have no idea how Nevada is doing at football. Like, that's kind of how it is for high school parents, and like, they're like, oh, like NIL's now a thing. And then they're just learning, rev share and in-house stuff is going. And then now we have roster caps and and scholarship caps. I mentioned to the high school, coach, I'll say, hey, like, next year there's going to be 105 cap on football for the roster. Right. And right now, Florida has 132 people on their football.
Wow.
Right. I don't know if you guys saw, there was, a young lady, a high school, she was committed to Penn State, and she tweeted, I can no longer go to Penn State because the roster cap for soccer is 28. So I'm now, back to the drawing board on finding an opportunity. Right. So like, that's a whole nother thing. You're in that. And I wouldn't be shocked if there's hard caps on actual offers you can give, because like you're going to get to a point where people are going to take offers, and then all of a sudden you're not going to have any spots. And like, that's something that happens now with scholarships, but
sure.
I think it could be more stringent, and like our soccer team right now probably has 33, and the cap is 28 next year. Right. So like, we're not in a bad spot. Right. But there's some schools that could be at 42. Like our lacrosse team had 44. So like, there's a lot of those things that, like, oh, like if you mention that to a parent, they might not even know that there's going to be roster caps next year. And their team, like if you're getting recruited to a sport and you're signing classes 5 and they have 32 and they're only graduating 7, the math isn't, it's a little close there. Right?
The math ain't mathing, right?
Math ain't mathing.
And you bring up a good point, right? Because there's all these changes, right? And parents are having to keep on top of this. Coaches, which oftentimes, especially some of the elite schools around the country, they're, dealing with this as well. How are you guys dealing with all of these things? I know you talked that you guys are kind of well positioned. Is this something that you guys are constantly monitoring? And what are other people, like peers of yours, who do your same or similar role at other schools handling this?
Yeah. So, I mean, our coaches had yesterday they had, the first coaches meeting of the year, and kind of talked about the pacing and how we want to recruit, the 2025, 2026 with, what we think is right. And, the league, the NCAA puts these limits, but the SEC may have different ones. Right. So like what we're hearing, and we can't negotiate with the ACC or I'm not allowed to say, oh, Florida is considering this many scholarships for them because of, then there's a whole bunch of legal stuff with that. Right. So, but I will say that from how my, peers are working, I'm on a call every month, about 40 people in my position across the country. And, it's hard. If you haven't seen, I'm mentioning a lot of relevant stuff, but LMU, I think it's Loyola Marymount University in California, cut 6 sports, and then Texas A&M cut 18 admin. And if
Right.
if I did the math, I'd guess that's like $3 million of payroll, right? When 20 to $22 million is that number, right? There could be a lot of different, cutting of, if you're not a rev gen situation for your school, there could be a lot of questions there. Like, is there going to be a situation where, if football is getting rev gen, do we need to have a whole recruitment department? Like, how big does that need to be when we're just offering them, a check, right? So there's a lot of that stuff that we need to figure out. And at the end of the day, it's about driving winning. And we're the only nonprofit in the world that success is based on winning.
Wow. That's amazing when you think about it. That's
right. So, and then it's like, well, with RevGen, are we a nonprofit?
Well, remember at the top of the show, remember my intro, I said, you guys are like the professional. I mean, I grew up, just for full disclosure, both of my parents grew up in the state of Florida. Went to high school there, and one of my parents went to college there in the state of Florida. So that when I say that, I mean, that's what I was.
I mean, they call us the big three: Florida, Miami, Florida State. So that's like, and we have professional sports in the state of Florida, but the Gator logo is the most popular logo in the state, including all professional logos.
All right. If you like what you're hearing, stay ahead of the game. Join our weekly newsletter for deep analysis and exclusive insights. Check the link in the description.
So, Ben, if we can transition just a little bit here. So, how are you utilizing NIL in the development of student athletes? And, how are you helping them utilize this opportunity in the NIL space to take that next step and, get whatever experience they can, because not everybody's going into professional sports after playing at Florida. They're going to be a professional accountant or attorney or something else. How are you helping them with that development?
So, I mean, there's NIL. We've been talking a lot about collective money. But I think you're kind of alluded to true NIL and building a brand and kind of setting yourself up for the future. Yesterday on that call with the father of the football player that only has one post on social, I asked him what's your son's major? And he goes, oh, it's sports management and marketing. And he was debating doing an NIL deal with his son or hiring him on staff during the summer. And I said, well, why don't you have him run your social, and it's that way on his resume, he has something. If he wants to be in sports, marketing, he has marketing on so it's that's not an NIL thing. That's just we're working on him as a professional, right?
That's super smart. I really love this, Ben.
Yeah. And at the same time, one of our goalies for our women's soccer team, her name's Jaden. She wants to do product design specifically with shoes and apparel. So I messaged one of my friends who's interning at Under Armour, and I said, hey, can you connect her with someone at Under Armour, and they're going to have a call about designing shoes at Under Armour. So, there's obviously the NIL part, is building a brand, telling your story, but not everyone. We have 60,000 students at Florida, and there's probably 60 influencers, right? So
wow.
So 1% maybe, right? And then there's people that just do TikTok, right? They're just doing it
right. So, and you alluded to, just for those who don't know, there's people who are definitely getting the bulk share, the brand deals, which you're talking about. And then you're talking about the massive opportunity that's out there for any athlete, whether you're a walk-on, if you're on maybe an Olympic sport that's not a rev, to build their platforms and then monetize it, right? Get paid.
Yeah. And I mean, our most followed athlete on TikTok is a 17-year-old freshman male track athlete. He doesn't even, I think he just turned 18. I owe him a happy birthday text. And so it's it's one of those things where, and he just found how to do it. Right. And he doesn't do anything crazy. He's not doing dances that much, but he found how the algorithm works for him. We have another track athlete who's a senior, and he just does those day in the life of a D1 athlete, vlog style content, and it's like what I eat in a day. And he's on like 19 of them. And there was a football player that was a recruit that came up to him and said, "Hey man, I watch your TikToks." And it was a track athlete that was impacting a football player. So like little things like that. How I help is I say, hey, like, I was a creator. I did my road trip and stuff. I've had deals and I say, hey, like, this is what I would do in your situation. I usually say, hey, like, what are you eating in Gainesville? Where are you going in Gainesville? And what brands do you use like that are national brands? And let's start with those 5 or 6 companies and say, hey, like, let's try to get something there. But when athletes come to Florida, they have 3 turnkey NIL deals in town they can take advantage of from day one. There's a national yoga studio called Yoga Pod that gives our athletes free yoga if they post once a week on their story. There's a car wash place in town that won Bloomberg's world's best car wash that gives free car washes. And it's a mom and pop car wash place. And then there's a Instagram. Well, it's like a coupon company that will pay athletes to be in reels, and they don't have to put them on their Instagram. They're just for that. So with those 3, local companies I built relationships with, they could build out, a media kit from day one and say, hey, like, I've worked with these 3 companies, right? And one of them is a national company, Yoga Pod. So like
this is great strategy. I just want to jump in here, and this is great. I have a question for you because you're a content creator, and Keith and I are obviously in one of the biggest things that we talk about all the time is just getting started, right? Like I think we all have this ability to overthink it, to spend an hour on a TikTok video when most people just start going through and doom scrolling. Talk to me about getting student athletes to create content. And I'm sharing this authentically as as a content creator myself. We know sometimes we can build things up in our mind to be so huge instead of just like hitting that button and publishing.
Yeah, and I mean, it goes back to Gary Vaynerchuk, who's like, marketing polarizing guy, but his mantra of document, don't create is just, that's all it is. And perfect example is Skylar Wallace, who just graduated from Florida as the all-time D1 hits leader in softball ever, like all time. And last summer, I think I told her, hey, like, she had like 11,000 followers on Instagram. I said, hey, like this summer, you're going to be training, just press record. And she literally just made Instagram reels of her working out, locking in, right? And she built, I think she's almost at 60,000 followers just on Instagram. I don't know what her TikTok is. And now she's got bigger real deals. She had a T-Mobile interview deal. She had what sunglasses? Maybe Oakley, I think, did a deal with her. And now she's.
No, I love this because what you're saying is so true. It's just, I was talking offline with Keith before, and I was like, I think, like you were saying, and I'm a big Gary Vaynerchuk. Actually, I have his book behind me on this shelf of document, don't create, and I think that's so cool. And so, I guess my question for you: are you also like part like content coach in that sense? Because that's what I'm hearing is you're teaching them like, hey, man, instead of like going and thinking about this big, huge series. Just do what you're just document what you're already doing.
Yeah. And it's funny you say that, Jay, because the whole time Ben is talking, I'm thinking he's talking like a coach. You need to be on the
exactly. I love
staff directory as coach Chase.
I would love that. I would love any kind of I like my title, but I would love it.
Ben, that should be your new username. You should change your social media handle to something like content coach, like Coach.
Well, it's funny. Some of our athletes call me coach, even though I'm not a coach. I'll take it. But no, I agree. I'm not. I think I know more because of my failures than I do, my successes. I actually, before I got my job at NIL, I was almost hired by a big YouTuber out in LA to be his like kind of chief of staff. He has 12 million subscribers on YouTube. And so like there was something there that I, had awareness of and storytelling, but it's again, going back to not everyone wants to do that. A lot of our athletes are like, oh, that's too try hard or whatever. But, on the document side, our star volleyball player, Kennedy Martin, just posted a video of her working out. She did this, she was like backing up with weights and her stomach went like super thin. And I think it got 12 million views on TikTok this week. Just that video, because it was like just a goofy video. And that's her because someone pressed record while she was working out and it works out. And this is a great story, and then we can move on. So one of our gymnasts, her name is Sloan. I think she had 3, maybe 2 posts on Instagram, about 8,000 followers. And she posted her first Instagram reel, and it was of her doing a vault, I think at the SEC championship, incredible vault. And she put it to Ice Spice, right? The
Okay.
artist Ice Spice.
Up and coming.
And
For those who don't know, Ice Spice, an up and coming trending artist, especially on TikTok. She's the latest craze right now.
And this video, she put it on Instagram reel. It had 12 million views, 1.8 million likes, and she now has 148,000 followers because of it. And
Hey, Ben, I
Ice
almost
Spice
want to
shared
throw
it
my
on her
headphones
story.
off. I almost, when you're telling me that number, let me tell you why. Because one of the things I always say is that people are one post away from going viral.
One post away, and now she's set, she can charge but she can charge a real monthly salary for, if she posts twice a month and charges a company, that's probably as much as I'm making on my salary. Like with the value
you're
she
talking
has.
off, just so we're clear too, because I want to talk past this. You're talking off of one post, Ben, right? I mean, just for those listening who
she
may not
posted
be
one. She had about 6,000 followers. She posted one reel on Ice Spice. Ice Spice shared it on her story. And now if you go to her Instagram, I had like 1.8, 1.9 million likes, I think 12 million views. And now, and she's continuously our most, like, the growth monthly is just because of that video. I think she maybe, I don't know if she's broken 150,000 on Instagram, but she's right there. And at that number, you can really, you're not set for life, but you can build something, whether it's, in gymnastics. She could be a gymnastics creator. She can be an influencer. She can build a brand, a business around that. And it's one life-changing post. And I gotta say, like, all it takes, our team made the video, right? So like that's helpful. And that's one of the good things about being at a school that has content people for sports, specific sports. Like our gymnastics team is high level. We have a professional videographer for every meet. They travel together and they make good content. And when you are able to, literally, you can just download the content and put it on Instagram and like that. I don't know if she would have gotten that somewhere else.
Yeah, and I love it, and especially if athletes take that, repurpose it. A lot of times when people go viral, they just have the one video, but if they repurpose it, add a spin to it, talk about it, just keep amplifying it.
Yeah,
I love
breaking
it.
down her viral video, like you could do a little breakdown of it.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I have a question for you, Ben, because you are a really talented content creator. How I came about knowing about you, I didn't remember your name. This is I only say this because this is how I share this for those who are learning how this process works. Is you're just scrolling, and I got to know your name because I followed you on this journey. You were going around, you're in like a van, if I recall, and you were going around all these stadiums. And I'm gonna tell you why I remember. Like that's my bucket list, because many of us, like all of us on this call, we work at sports. It's hard to go see other teams play. So when I saw this, I was so jelly, but I mean that in a good way, because I was like, you know what? This is so smart, because like before you get to doing all these other things, like you're just living your best life. So I love that. But my real question is, how do you feel like that helps you? We just listened to you coach them up. How do you think that impacts your ability to help not just the student athletes, but also the coaches? Because I know you have some stakeholders there with you talked about the track, Mouse, the head coach there, is arguably the greatest track coach alive, arguably. How does that impact it?
Yeah, no, I think that between, being an attorney and doing the road trip, most college football games in one season at the time, 77, most on the road, no one's ever driven to 77 games, telling that story. And it gives me authority in a lot of rooms, because on the law side, like, I'm not just some scrub, and on that side it's like, oh, like this guy went for it. Everyone says I was living out their dream, right? And it also, I was able to network. I met ads from different schools, coaches from different schools, and I spoke and learned and got to watch what other schools are doing all over the country. There's a guy who's tailgated here, and he's been to he goes 27 years of tailgating. He's been to every home game. That's really awesome, right? But like, he's missing out. Maybe he goes to road games, I don't know. But like, nothing brings people together more than college football and college sports, specifically college football. So on that road trip, you're able to see the cathedrals that are these stadiums, the religions that are the college sports. People call like Texas A&M a cult. I think it's awesome, right? Like, I think that those traditions and that atmosphere and what they do and all their chants. Like the midnight yell is probably one of the greatest traditions in college sports that no one talks about, because people are like, oh, it's weird. Like, who cares? Like, it's a tradition and people have fun.
It is weird, but I'm gonna let you keep going. But I'd
yeah,
jump in.
It is weird, but like I've watched them on YouTube,
yeah,
and it's just like everyone's having a good time. And it's one of those things where, like, if people are hating on you for having a good time, that's not your problem, right? They're not hurting anybody, right? Like, they're having, and that's what it's all about. Like, you go and you meet people from all these different schools, and you're able to kind of share a little bit of these different stories from their place. And here in Gainesville, it helps. Like, we have coaches from all over. Like, actually, just this last week, our women's basketball program, I guess every year we have a women's basketball camp in Gainesville, from coaches from all over come here. And one of our coaches said, hey, could you meet with someone from Tulsa? I didn't realize it was the head coach of women's basketball at Tulsa.
Oh, wow.
And we had a 2-hour dinner, just a one-on-one, talking about NIL, talking about how to build their program. And like, it's like, well, aren't you, like, competitive? Like, Tulsa and Florida are not going to meet anytime soon. Like, and it's one of those things where it's like, we're all in this together. That's why I said we have a 40-person call, and George is on there, and different things like that. But like, on this side of it, there is a competitive thing, but like, a rising tide lifts all ships. We're not competing for the same donor dollars, right? So like, maybe on the brand side, on the marketing side, there could be some stuff there, but like, at the end of the day, it's about protecting these athletes, giving them the best opportunity to learn at great universities, and making a product that our families and our fans and our alumni are proud of.
All great points. And, hearing you talk, Ben, there's a great sense of pride with everything that you're doing. And I love how you're talking about not just the football men's basketball team, you're talking about some of the women's sports as well. And I think sometimes, there's a misconception sometimes in public, social media, that, a lot of NIL is just going to football, men's basketball. And I think you made some absolutely solid points about the opportunity for some of the female sports. And
yeah, I mean, our highest earning athletes that aren't getting collective deals are our gymnasts. I mean, we have six.
Do you think that's amazing? I do. Do you think it's amazing?
Yeah, I mean, flips are compelling content, and like, for me, but they're also they work their butts off. I mean, I think we have 6 or 7 with about 100,000 or more followers. Leanne Wong, she's got about 87. She was just an alternate for the Paris Olympics. She bought a house with NIL. She sold over 10,000 hair bows at $20 a piece, over 1,000 leotards. She's wrote a book. Like,
and these are
none
all
of that
things
would be
she's
possible.
Selling as an influence marketer on her channels, right?
What'd you say?
These are all things she's selling as an influencer marketer on her social media channel.
She's built an incredible brand. Her nickname is the CEO. And then we have Skylar, our softball athlete. We have Shaq's daughter just got on campus, and she's our most followed athlete on Instagram, Miara. And she's kind of just figuring out what she wants to do. She's great on TikTok. But like, it's not all, our football players, like the ones that have the big deals, are there, and their followers are because they're the starting quarterback, or they're the starting. It's not because they're creators, right? So it's like a different kind of vibe. Parker Valby, she just was in the Olympics. She won back-to-back 1,500 titles in track, and she
everybody knows, Ben, I'm a former D1 track athlete, so I'm sorry, this is all music to my ears.
So like, and I'll tell you this, like, she got a huge following because she's good at track, but her post-game press conferences were some of the funniest things you'd ever watch.
They really were.
Like, there was things like she, and she was just she's so charismatic, and first women's track athlete to sign with Nike in college, right? So like, she was doing some great stuff there. So yeah, like, going back to what you said, it's the internet is the great equalizer, right? And NIL is the great equalizer for athletes, right? So like, they're able to do everything. Well, they should be able to do everything that the students on campus are able to do. Florida was founded in 1853, and until 2021, every other person on campus could start a business. Every other person on campus could sell a T-shirt with their name on it, or have a YouTube channel. YouTube's been around since 1853, obviously, but no, like these are the things that all those students wanted to be athletes though, but now all the athletes may or may not want to be influencers. So this is the great equalizer. And I think there was a law journal from Texas A&M that said, hey, like, we can't treat athletes not like regular students, that came out yesterday. And I haven't read it because it's 45 pages, but that's what I've been saying since day one. And when our admins and different people ask, like, well, they can't do something with the Gator logo on it on campus, and I'm like, there's an influencer that is at Phi Gamma or whatever, like, she's doing the exact same thing. Right. So like,
or even though we all know, for those who follow the college, I mean, the sororities and fraternities on y'all's campus, I'm serious, it's just their social media followings are huge.
Yeah.
Right before campus, I saw all the content, and they're wearing, I'm just pointing this out for those that may not know, they're wearing y'all school's logo in this content that's going viral.
Yeah. So it's like, why? And again, at the high level, the biggest and hardest thing in NIL and in most industries is enforcement at scale.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and that goes down to the high school level. Like, oh, like, everyone asks, like, oh, like Florida high schools, now it's legal for NIL to be in there. Like, I can name athletes that have done NIL deals in high school, like, before it was legal. Right. Because, like, no one's watching. The only way, like, someone's going to get in trouble is if, like, you're the rival high school and you see him driving a whatever and you call the NCAA. Right. Like,
yeah.
But, like, there's no one at the high school level that, like, NIL became a thing, but no one was hired to be like the NIL enforcer, like, or no one, like, for me, it's like, oh, another example is, these new NCAA changes with the $600 or more, like, they just are like, hey, like, here's a new thing that you have to enforce. And with the $20 million, hey guys, you're allowed to do this now. Go find $20 million. One of my friends, he thought the NCAA was cutting that check. He's like, wow. Oh, like, isn't the NCAA just giving you guys $20 million to spend on athletes? No, like, we got to go, like, find that money. So there's, like, a lot of awareness there too. Like, they're just making these new rules, and we got to figure out how to
real quick on this, just have a quick question on the personal brand side for athletes. How do they manage, how do you help them manage this huge opportunity of NIL, and especially you're talking about some of the Olympic athletes that are taking a huge advantage along with the larger brand deals that people are getting? How do they manage NIL, social media, and their athletic commitments?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's just like another bucket that, I recommend our athletes that want to do it to do batch content, which means, like, if you're going to record or post videos, like, just do like 5 videos in the same day and then just post them later on, and that's the same thing with collaboration. Like, we're trying to build up like a collaboration club, or, UCLA has done a good job of having something like that already. But, like, if you're going to do it, like, build out a content calendar, pull out your workout calendar and your fitness calendar and, your teamworks, and look at that, and in your mind you, your class schedule in homework time. But, like, if you can find 3 hours a week to press record, then you find 2 hours a week to edit, or you just do it all in one day, 5 hours, and then you just post. You build out. All right, I'm gonna record Sunday morning. I'm gonna go to lift. I edit Sunday night, and then I'm gonna post Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then you do that over and over again. Or if you're getting up extra buckets, or gonna get, like, just go put if you're working out on your own, just put your phone down.
Yep.
And I'll tell you this, like, our gymnastics program bought, like, just the tripods for our athletes just to, like, have in the gym. Like,
right.
That's just, so they have one at every rotation for them to use while they're training. And, like, whenever you want to use that content, go ahead.
And if you're listening to this, you could then become an Amazon affiliate. This is the gear that I use, promote it. And if you have enough followers, you could do TikTok shop, right? And promote those items and
just have fun, right? I mean, but it takes a lot of, we had our financial literacy summit yesterday, it's mandatory for all athletes. And it's one of those things, like, there's so many things that these athletes are focused on, but a lot of them don't realize that, this could be for in the influencer space, like, the highest earning years they have.
Yeah. And Ben, you and I have gotten to know each other over time here. And, one of the things I love doing is getting to go around and do these talks at universities, and, a lot of fun. But something you hit on there is something I hear from coaches, some of the, I want to say smaller schools, and it's not meant to be disrespectful, but sometimes I encounter some of the coaches at some of the smaller schools, and they have some hesitancy, or with some of the student athletes pulling out the phones, pre-practice or after practice. And
I mean, we have no phone policies at certain times, like in workouts.
Yes.
So like I get that.
And that was what I was going to ask was, because there's obviously, some rules, about like doing filming, during practice, during competitions, not using that for NIL purposes, but I know as I approach a lot of schools that don't have a great structure yet, they don't have a great organized, system for this. I get some of the coaches that ask, well, how should we handle this? And set some ground rules, pre-practice, post-practice, on their own time. Let them do what they want to do, content-wise. So yeah, I was kind of curious, how that works at Florida.
Yeah, I mean, it's every coach is going to decide how they want the culture of their program, right? Like, I like our women's basketball team. They do TikToks in the locker room, and like I said, gymnastics, like when they have open training, and like we expect to win championships in gymnastics, like SEC and national championships. But that means that our athletes train longer on their own than probably a lot of schools. I don't know for sure, but like that gives them an opportunity, like to work on something and record it. I mean, they could be recording it just to review it, right? Like, and then that maybe they hit it for the first time, and if they're able to get that on camera, like that could be worth 100,000 views, 1 million views, and part of their story. We have athletes that we have the world's tallest teen on campus. He's 7'7", 7'9" or so, and like for him, his parents, he's from Canada, and he said, hey, like I'm going to start recording because at some point, like I'll probably have some documentary done on me, and they're going to need that content. And then that's self-awareness, right? You're 7'8", 7'9", world's tallest teen. Like the content, like is the long tail there, right? Like, and that's just him like pressing record and saving it for, it could be 10 years from now, right? But like that B-roll of him here at Florida is going to be worth something when they tell that story of Olivier and what he's doing. And then, and that could be for, we have athletes here that, like you said earlier, Olympians. We had 41 Olympians, right?
Wow.
I think about 20 of them were current athletes, right? So like those are compelling stories there of the work they put in here. And maybe it's not even for NIL. It's just like, if they're, Kobe always used to say, you weren't with me in the gym, right? But now this gives people the ability to be with you, whether it's, immediately, we're in the immediate gratification era, or it could be down the road, right? And I think that's, again, it goes back to the culture, what the coaches want. But, I think in Florida, we give our athletes the opportunity to do what they need to do and what they want to do when it's not, business hours, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, and I'm really excited, Ben. One of the things that as Keith and I sat down and got ready for this interview with you and your personal journey, your personal brand, and then obviously the Gator brand, want to talk to you about the future, right? Because this is what every time I run into someone and I tell them what I do, that's the biggest question they ask. So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about the future. What do you see outside of the things you talked about earlier? What do you see as the biggest disruptors for NIL and college athletics coming up?
I mean, it really depends on what the courts decide on Title IX and what the courts and what the NCAA says on how this revenue share is going to work, right? Is it going to be like the settlement where I think it was like 85 or 90% went to football and 5% went to men's basketball, and then it kind of tiered off for there? Like those are the landmark decisions that will be challenged. We like whatever decision is made, there will be lawsuits, right? And going forward, if you want to remain competitive, you just have to keep pounding the rock and say, hey, like you have to answer a question too. It's like the way we work, are we going to work and focus on the way we believe it to be when these lawsuits are settled, or are we going to wait until and stay in the lane that we're in now and kind of only extend that leash as the NCAA, officially extends that leash, right? So, Tennessee did some stuff and that was, we know where this is going. We're going to do it now, right? And and then they won, or that lawsuit was settled. But that's a real decision maker, right? Of like how that's going to be. But to answer your question very succinctly, I think it's those decisions on the Title IX and the rev share stuff that's going to open up Pandora's box, and also what this clearinghouse for true NIL deals looks like, and if that is enforceable to have the athletes, like I said earlier, the sorority or fraternity guy who's got a bunch of followers, he doesn't have to report anything. And now, our third string left guard has to report his deal with Sonny's Barbecue. How is that fair? Right. And then how does this third party even decide what's, true market value? And on top of that, if, Sonny signs an NDA and the contract is an NDA, whose business is it? Right. So like all of that, that's where this is going to go. And where I think there's got to be some decisions made. Otherwise, we're going to be, fighting in the gray and recruiting in the gray, and hopefully winning in the gray.
Yeah, hopefully winning. I like that. I like that. By the way, I'm getting to live my inner Ben here on the road. I get to visit a new stadium today. Just FYI.
Nice.
Yeah.
Where are you at?
I am in Pittsburgh at the moment, so going to have a little fun up here. And I actually thought about that as I got my ticket today. I was like, I'm going to be texting Ben a picture of me in the stands today and just, do my little visit.
Ben's a legend, man. 77 stadiums, man. That's legit. I don't care who you are.
Yeah, no, it was unreal. It was 77 games in 75 stadiums. I went to 2 twice. But no, it was, and Pittsburgh is, are you going to be at, I don't even know what the stadium's called now, Heinz Field, but now it's something else.
I'm going to the Pirates Cubs game.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Yeah,
that
baseball.
No, that's awesome. Yeah. I mean, I had some work done on Betty White, my van in Pittsburgh, and I don't know if it helped or hurt it, but she kept going for a little bit. No, I think it's one of those things. I know probably wrapping up here, but like the future is, whatever our coaches decide they're willing to do, right? And until they're told otherwise. Again, we are a champion. Our slogan is we are a championship experience with integrity, and our coaches are not going to, cross any lines. Our compliance would rather us not dance in the gray or dance in the rain. But, they also know that their contracts, the coaches, are affected by, like, at the end of the day, it's about winning. And that goes back to that. We're the only nonprofits that our livelihood is based on 17 to 23, 24-year-old super grad transfers. And they're, what they do on the field, court, mat, track, if you will. And there's a lot of things that can be impacted by the way you recruit and retain talent.
I got a quick question for you. How do you see this, or do you see this affecting high school? Because we know in sports, right, usually it starts pros. In this case, it starts in college. It's going down to high school. And I asked this because I was talking this week to a 6A Texas high school basketball coach. And in Texas, correct me if I'm wrong, Keith, I believe it's not permissible in the state of Texas. And he was telling me, I did not verify this information, so it's really about the conversation. He said, if you look at the top 10 players from last season in Texas, they're no longer in Texas. Do you see this affecting potentially? And we're just asking your opinion because it's now we're just looking like the future. Do you think this will happen?
I mean, I think it's something where if I was a head coach at the high school level, and I'm getting paid $45,000 in a teacher stipend to be the head coach, like, how do I feel about that football player making $100,000? Like, that's the other part, is like, how many of these football coaches, I know there's a lot of, like, in the back pocket stuff from the high school to the university level. We don't have to talk about that, but like, there's going to be a whole, like, conversation about, all right, well, I'm coaching this kid, like, and you're doing a deal with him. Like there's going to be some selfish stuff there. But going back to answer your question, I think it's one of those things where we could be on the road to the European model, where you sign a kid at 13, right? The NFL signs him at 13 or whatever. NBA signs him at 13, and they have his rights, and he kind of just goes through this. We're a young country, right? We just had our bicentennial, 50 years ago. So we're at 250 or so now. But like, Europe has had Europe has houses that are older than the United States, right? And I'm not saying we do it right or wrong. I'm just saying there could be things there that maybe we look at other models. I know, and speaking of, college soccer, like the Super League has been, something that's been talked about for football. If that happens, maybe there is a realignment of, regional sports where, like, does it make sense for, the softball team at Stanford, an ACC school now, to travel to Syracuse and then to North Carolina and then back and then back and then to SMU, and like, does that financially, does it make sense? Does it make sense if they're students still, right? Like, so that's a lot of the things that need to be decided. And if there's a realignment and they go back, like, when that, junior committed to Stanford, they thought that their parents who live in Palo Alto would be able to travel up to Oregon, travel, to USC, UCLA, all these home and away meets to see their child play. Nope, now they can't, right? So, like, what world is it that's fair, right? And it's all because of money, an extra 10 to 12, $15 million a year, when that's probably not going to break even on the travel budget now, right? Like you got to think, like, if you are Stanford and you are their football equipment staff who has to drive across country to to Syracuse, are they going to fly the equipment now? Like, can they fly it? Or, like, if you're USC, do you buy a second truck and equipment and just plant it in Indianapolis and just have a whole nother thing of equipment just in Indianapolis in hopes that, one, it's good, and two, that you can have someone be that middleman? Like, that's the stuff no one's talking about that I'm curious to see what happens, right? Like, where, again, I think the difference was $15 million, but, like, logistically, like, with travel and all that stuff, you may be cutting it close, including the insurance on the travel.
Good points. Yeah.
Definitely. Ben, I got to tell you this, man. Last thing before we wrap up, you mentioned some things. Is there anything else that does keep you up at night? Is it the points that you talked about and building on those? Like, what is the thing, if you're laying in bed at night and you're thinking, man, where's this thing going? What's something?
I mean, for me, it's like, I see that, like, in-house is going to be a big deal, right? So, like, a lot of the nonprofit side is going to come in-house. So, like, what's going to move the needle next? And, it's marketing dollars. And if we're the University of Florida and we don't have someone who owns a, big box retailer or, a direct to consumer food items, or the chicken shack down the street that has, a unquestionable marketing budget, they can just, write some checks. Like, will we be able to compete in that next, era of NIL? Like, does Gainesville, Florida have enough businesses compared to other cities that would be willing to invest marketing dollars in the school? Like, does the Learfield or Playfly or whatever of your university have the ability for each one of the deals they broker to have a percentage carve out that's earmarked for NIL, for specific sport, or for all athletics? Like, that's what keeps me up at night, because that's where I know, like, the rev share is just raising the floor, right? So, like, if you go to, Florida, or you go to, LSU, here's the SEC rev share, here's state and income tax, wherever that looks like. And, and if you go to Florida, maybe you have a deal with, Yoga Pod, but if you go to LSU, maybe you have a deal with Raising Cane's, right? So, like, that's what keeps me up at night.
This is why we had you on the show, Ben. This is why we had you on the show. I mean, you came through, you dropped dimes, you gave us great insights, things that some hadn't heard, and some, I love it from your perspective because you are on the front lines.
Well, I hope that I added enough value here for someone to listen for an hour and 12 seconds, but usually I listen to podcasts at 2x speed, so hopefully someone doesn't get bored by my monotone voice sometimes.
Hey, thank you so much for coming on the show, Ben Chase. We appreciate you.
My pleasure. I hope you guys, I hope this podcast does well, and I'm grateful for you guys having me on.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, Ben Chase, University of Florida Gators. Thanks so much for coming on. If you enjoyed this conversation, like the video, share it, and let us know in the comments. Don't forget to hit subscribe. And if you want more deep dive into sports and the NIL, sports marketing, influencer marketing, come join us here.
Smash the like button. Question of the day. What did I say that you disagreed with? Let me know in the comments.
Let us know in the comments. I love that. That's great. Let us know in the comments. Until next time, keep aiming high, both on and off the field.
Thanks, guys. Go Gators.
Be the story.